Congressman Schiff, thank you once again for allotting time from your busy schedule to talk to us on recent developments. You once again spearheaded an effort in Congress along with your colleagues to introduce a resolution regarding the genocide. This time around, it's a little bit different. How does this new resolution or bill differ from the past, and how can we work to move it forward?
Ara, it's great to join you always, and thank you for the wonderful job you do for the community. We do have a different draft, quite a different draft this year than we have in the past. In the past, the genocide resolution has gone through a lot of the facts of the genocide and the history of the genocide. This session, we're taking a different approach. It's more of a call to action for the administration to make a recognition of the genocide part of its policy, to work with Turkey to get Turkey to recognize the genocide, to end the blockade of Armenia, to bring about a more just relationship between Turkey and Armenia based on the historic truth, based on a recognition of the facts of the genocide. Is a very powerful resolution. We've introduced it on a bipartisan basis. We'll be working, of course, on a very bipartisan basis to gather support for the resolution. And it will be the challenge it is every session. Every session we have to fight the wealth of the Turkish lobby. We have to fight those within the administration at times and the former administrations that want to perpetuate the same policy they've adopted in the past and want to placate Turkey. But from my own point of view, it's never been in our national interest to be complicit in a campaign of genocide denial. And if the truth means that it presents some rupture to our relationship, it's not much of a relationship if it can't withstand the truth on something this significant. So we're plowing forward, and I feel a real sense of urgency as we start to approach the 100th anniversary, as there are fewer and fewer survivors among us, that we get this passed, that we put our country on record. It's hard to justify why.
We have to, I think, start again. Sorry. Is it okay to start over?
Yeah.
Okay. We are on Hollywood Boulevard. Congressman, thank you for allotting some time from your schedule to talk to us about some of the issues that are pending in Congress. You recently spearheaded, along with some of your colleagues, a new effort toward U.S. acknowledgement or affirmation of the Armenian Genocide. Can you tell us a little bit about how different this new version is?
Sure, Nara, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the wonderful job that you do for the community. We did introduce a very different resolution this session. In the past, the resolution has recited a lot of the history and facts of the genocide. This resolution is more operational. We call upon the administration to take action in light of the facts of the genocide, to bring about a more just and honest relationship in the region between Turkey and Armenia based on truth and a recognition of what took place. We call on the president to live up to what he has expressed as a candidate for that high office about the imperative of recognizing the genocide. We introduced it on a bipartisan basis. We'll continue to gather support for it on a very bipartisan basis, and with a real sense of urgency that as we approach the 100th anniversary and there are fewer and fewer survivors with us, that we get this passed now. It will be hard, as it always is. We confront the full weight of the Turkish lobby with all of their resources. We have to contend with it, some of the administration and some in prior administrations who want to perpetuate the policy we've had in the past, which is, in my view, a policy of complicity in the Turkish campaign of denial. So it will be hard, but it's a fight worth fighting, and I have optimism. I have optimism every time I see more and more Turks stepping forward and speaking truthfully about the genocide. On the anniversary of the passing of Hrant Dink, when thousands of Turks take to the streets with placards that say, "I am Hrant Dink," it gives me reason for optimism. And we're in now a very interconnected world where there's a much freer flow of information. And I hope that the new generation growing up in Turkey will look at their history with eyes wide open, and that we not only recognize the genocide here, but they recognize it there. That's the most important.
It seems, however, the administration is moving farther away from this issue. During a recent meeting between President Obama and Prime Minister Erdogan in Washington, there was hardly a mention of, there was no mention actually of the genocide issue or even the Turkish-Armenian rapprochement. Have you heard anything from the White House on this issue?
Nothing that's given me a lot of encouragement. I continue to weigh in with the administration. I spoke to Secretary of State Kerry about this prior to April 24th to urge him to be a strong advocate within the administration, because of course he's been a strong advocate in the Senate. But there are steps they could take, which, it bewilders me that they haven't. There are cases before the Supreme Court right now on legislation that I helped co-sponsor when I was a state senator, allow victims of the genocide to make claims on valid insurance policies they held at the time of the genocide, claims that are time barred but for this legislation. Well, a court struck down our bill saying it was preempted by federal law, by federal policy against recognition. Well, there is no federal policy against recognition. The fact that we haven't passed this bill doesn't mean that the government is affirmatively on record with a policy of non-recognition. And the administration could weigh in that court case and say there's nothing in our policy that should preclude states from providing means of redress to their citizens who've been victims of genocide or make claims on policies that would otherwise provide for their family. So it's frustrating. I think in the most recent meeting between the president and Erdogan, they were focused on Syria. But we are, and always have been, unfortunately, the victim of circumstance. And those circumstances are, what do we need Turkey for at the moment? And even when they turn down access for our troops in Iraq, or even when they vote against us in the United Nations on Iran's nuclear program, even then, it has been a challenge to move the administration, but I still believe that this is such a moral imperative that we can't allow it to be the victim of any immediate circumstance, and we have to take a broader, more principled view than that.
One thing that didn't go unnoticed this April 24th was your message on the House floor on the Armenian Genocide, which you did in Armenian. How did that all come about?
Well, you'll have to tell me how my accent and pronunciation was, but...
You were great, by the way.
Thank you. I've been teasing people, I've asked them how much could they understand what I said, and they said, about 90%. And I said, well, that's because you probably speak a different dialect. And, each year I try to bring home in a different way the facts of the genocide. And it's a challenge because the crime is so horrific, and it has such an order of magnitude, 1.5 million people. Because the numbers are so large, people often don't want to think about what it really means. It's hard for them to get their mind around, and sometimes I've found it easier to talk about a single family and who they lost, because that's something people can latch onto. But this year, I wanted to try something different, and I thought it would be powerful to speak in the language of those who perished, to speak in the language of those who survived and those who came to this country, and the language of those I see in the school children that are continuing to maintain their culture. And because after all, part of the goal of a genocide is not only to eliminate a people, but it's to eliminate their history, their culture, their language. And I was hoping that if I could speak well enough, it would resonate. And it would grab the attention of my colleagues in Congress as well. And it did. I gave no preface. I just began my speech in Armenian, and I wanted to do it that way because I wanted to be jarring to people on the House floor. And of course, most of them had no idea what language I was speaking, let alone what I was saying. But they came up to me afterwards. It's very unusual for anyone to speak in a foreign language on the House floor. I wasn't even sure was allowed to do it. I had to check with a parliamentarian in advance. But they came and asked me, what were you speaking? What were you speaking about? And I told them, and it gave me another chance to help educate my colleagues about the genocide. But nothing prepared me for the reaction I got outside the building, which has been really quite wonderful and overwhelming. And it became somewhat of a YouTube sensation, to the degree that any House speech becomes a YouTube sensation. But most gratifying has been just being stopped on the street or in a restaurant or in a store by someone to tell me they heard my speech and what it meant to them, and that's been very moving.
Well, judging from the reaction the speech got on our social media platforms, the community appreciated that, especially on a day when the Obama administration once again failed to recognize it. And I've gotten a lot of calls in the office about it, so thank you. I'm going to move on and talk about foreign aid. You've also championed issues of aid to Armenia and especially Nagorno-Karabakh. And this year, during a questioning with the USAID president, he also brought up the issue of working with diaspora organizations to ensure aid to the Samtre Javakheti region, which we refer to as Javakh. How is that proceeding?
That's going well. I got a very positive response from the head of USAID. The challenge, Ara, that we've had in the past is we've appropriated funding for Artsakh, and then USAID and State Department don't spend the full amount. And we've heard various reasons and excuses for that. At one point they said, well, there's a lack of capacity to absorb the aid. But first of all, we're talking about a region with great need. And second, we're not talking about a huge amount of assistance. So that never rung true to me. And the USAID head has assured me that they will utilize the resources that we give them. And we'll be staying after that. We actually included mandatory language last year in the appropriations bill that said that they would not be able to not spend up to, which is what we'd said in the past, but rather spend a minimum of a certain amount to assist in the humanitarian needs there. So we'll be staying after that, working with the USAID to make sure those funds are utilized. I've also been working with USAID on making sure that those Armenian communities in Georgia that you mentioned share in the assistance we're providing Georgia. This is an issue I raised with the now former president of Georgia, but I've also raised with our USAID program. These are some very poor communities that could really use the assistance, and so we'll be following up on that as well to make sure that that help gets to where it's really needed.
And of course, another matter that you have been very outspoken about was last year's Azerbaijan's decision to pardon an axe murderer, Ramil Safarov. What impact do you think that still has, almost a year later, on the peace process? And what are some of the steps that the U.S. can take to directly address that? They have kind of gone around the issue a little bit. What can be done to, A, prevent issues like that from happening, and for Azerbaijan to face its own reality?
I was just appalled at Hungary repatriating him, and Azerbaijan not only releasing him, but Aliyev promoted him, gave him back pay, found him a place to live, paraded him through the streets like a returning hero. And this for, as you say, an axe murderer, someone who, during a NATO Partnership for Peace exercise, crept into the room of an Armenian soldier while he slept and tried to decapitate him with an axe, and then went back to smoking a cigarette. Pathological murderer, and they made a hero out of him. And what that says to me, and I think ought to say to the civilized world, is that Aliyev has no interest in peace in the region, no interest in a peaceful resolution, and there's no reason for any of the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh to have any confidence that any situation other than their own right of self-determination is going to protect their people. Certainly no form of Azerbaijani authority is going to protect them. And the way I think the U.S. ought to react is, for one thing, we provide foreign military assistance to Azerbaijan. If their commander-in-chief is going to behave this way, if Aliyev is going to behave this way, we shouldn't be giving him a dime in foreign military assistance. I don't know why we do anyway. They're awash in petroleum reserves. They don't need our assistance economically in any way. And we can't expect the Azeri soldiers to act in a professional or peace-loving way if their commander-in-chief is going to send the kind of message that Aliyev did in the pardon and the idolatry they're bestowing on this murderer. So I think we ought to cut them off.
As similar instances are taking place in Turkey, not as violent, but the oppression of writers and journalists, and more recently, an Armenian-American writer was jailed for blaspheming Turkey and Islam. Is there some kind of message that Congress can send to Turkey about its respect of human rights? I mean, we're seeing technically a very nice rapport between the Obama administration and the Turkish government, where it seems those issues seem to fall to the wayside in discussing different issues.
Well, you point out a real problem. Turkey is becoming the largest prison for journalists in the world. Turkey, Cuba, China, these are countries that are incarcerating huge numbers of journalists. This is incompatible with any form of democracy. And as the co-chair of the House Caucus on the freedom of the press, we need to speak strongly in the U.S. government about the degree to which Turkey is not permitting free speech, is cracking down on the voices of opposition as well as independent voices. And, they abuse sections of the Turkish criminal code that make it a crime to insult Turkishness. Obviously, as vague a standard as that can be used to suppress any kind of free expression. But they've used it to suppress any kind of flow of information about the genocide. And this is not pointed by any means solely at Armenian authors or journalists or speakers. They brought up on charges Orhan Pamuk, one of the most famous Turkish writers, a prize-winning author, and they were willing to bring him up on charges for having the audacity to speak plainly. So yes, you're absolutely right. This is a problem in Turkey. It's also a problem in Azerbaijan. I'm sure you're familiar with the case there of a very famous Azeri writer who had the audacity to write a novel which portrayed an Armenian family as being victimized, and therefore was, of course, anathema to the authorities in Azerbaijan, and people, I think one of the parliamentarians offered a reward to have his ear cut off, and he is now afraid for his life.
Let's come back to the district. Since January, you've had new geography to deal with. It's been reapportioned. How has it been? We're sitting in your actually new local office in Hollywood. How has it been to have Hollywood and West Hollywood added to your already large district?
It's been fantastic, and I didn't know that it would be possible to have a larger Armenian community than my former district, but I do, and it's wonderful. And we're sitting here right now in our office in Little Armenia, which is really a treat. I feel very fortunate. It's hard whenever you go through the 10-year redistricting because you lose areas that you love, and I did. I lost a lot of communities that I've loved representing. But I got a lot of communities back that I used to represent, a lot of the foothills of La Cañada, La Crescenta, Montrose, and Sunland, Tahunga. I got Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and Atwater Village back, which I used to represent. And I got a bunch of wonderful new communities like Echo Park and Hollywood and the Hollywood Hills and West Hollywood, which are tremendously interesting and vibrant and fun. And so it really has been a treat. But I'm particularly delighted to have Little Armenia in the district and have the Armenian population in the Hollywood area, which is very substantial, and that's really been just wonderful. So it's a nice, exciting, kind of reinvigorating change.
And what is the message to your constituents? It's a new laid out district. There are very important issues vis-a-vis the Armenian element, but also very important local issues that impact their life. What message do you have to the constituents?
Well, I want to let the constituents know that we are there to serve them. And we have 2 locations now. We have this office in East Hollywood. We also have an office in Burbank. And have a wonderfully capable staff. And so if constituents have issues with any of the federal agencies, whether it's immigration or veterans benefits, Social Security, Medicare, please let us know how we can help. We have been doing a series of coffees in the newer parts of the district so that people can get better acquainted with me and I can get better acquainted with them. So I hope that your viewers will come to a coffee with me soon. We had a couple last weekend in West Hollywood. We've got one coming up in Echo Park. And so please take advantage of opportunities to come and visit and say hello and let me know how I can be of service.
Thank you very much, Congressman. It's always been informative as always. And thanks again. We'll come back to you.
Please do.
All right. Thank you.